So I guess we are already there. Good. So we start the presentation here. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you're able to see us and to listen to us. Next time, I promise we will be able even to touch us, and we will have a physical meeting, not like this one here. Anyway, now to start with, I'm very happy to welcome you to this information session on the Green Deal call. You may have been connected before, and there has been a very nice general presentation of what the call is about, presented by John Bell, Director of DG RTD, and other colleagues from the agencies. What we're going to do now here is to explain one of the topics of the many which are composing this big call. I would even dare to say the nicest one, because it's ours. But anyway, possibly the other guys are doing the same thing. Anyway. Again, what we're going to talk about here is Area 7 of the Green Deal call of Horizon 2020, which is, as you see in the slides, biodiversity and ecosystem services. We're also lucky there because we have been able to group everything together into one single mega topic, very big topic, which we call restoring biodiversity and ecosystem services. So this is what we're going to talk about here today. Before we go into that, of course, I'm only going to tell you a brief summary of what this call is about. This call is a bit different to what we used to see in Horizon 2020. It is a bit different because it's really targeted to impact. It's targeted to show results. It's not that the other calls are not like this, but in this particular case, the time frame and the type of activities we're going to be aiming at are really something that need to show results very soon and to show a big impact. Why? Because, of course, of the urgency that we have to tackle the main issues of the European Green Deal. And I believe, indeed, the biodiversity and the ecosystem is indeed one of the biggest priorities we have to face. So again, having said that as an introduction, I will move directly to introduce our colleagues, which are going to present today with me and will be with us. First, let me welcome Anne. Anne, it's great to see you here. And certainly she's going to be introducing to us what is the political frame of this whole thing. Basically, the EU Biodiversity Strategy of 2030 is one of the main initiatives with the European Green Deal, and she will be giving us the framework conditions on where we will be operating, okay? Then I will be myself presenting you what the topic looks like and some of the nitty-gritty things of it as well. And immediately after, we will have a question and answer session, which will be moderated with the help of our colleagues from EASME, which is our executive agency for small and medium-sized enterprises. For the time being, we have Laura with us. Other colleagues, Victoria and Francisco Javier, will join us a bit later. It is very important that you understand the role of the agency here. Basically, everything will happen in their hands. We have defined a very nice topic, I believe, together with the member states. And now that it's approved, the agency will make it happen. They will be running the evaluation, they will be running the call, they will be together with you, selecting the proposal, signing the grant agreement, and what's even more important, they will be following the development of the projects and making sure that the projects which are going to be funded will deliver what they have to deliver. So having said that, and having introduced my colleagues here, I'm going to remind you to start, before we start the real presentation, that there is a section in the system, which is also new to us, which is called questions and answers. We kindly ask you to start writing your answers right now, or when you have them, when you will be listening to Anne, to myself. Don't wait until the end, because we need to process them to be able to give you an answer. So right now, you can already start checking that, and we will be posting the questions that you raise in there. We will certainly try to answer most of them. And if not, of course, we will come back with answers later on, okay? So having said that, I really go into the real show. Again, I thank again Anne for being with us. She will give us a flavor of the biodiversity strategy for 2030. And I will be holding the slides, so just tell me what I have to do, okay? Thank you, Anne. The floor is yours. Oh my God. I think we have, sorry to say it anyway, a slight problem that happens because apparently Anne is experiencing some network problems and we don't see her in the screen. So we will give her a minute if she's back, or otherwise we will need to possibly alter the order of the presentation, which is not what I intended to do. But I think this is possibly going to be the best thing to deal with this particular issue. In the meantime, Laura, maybe you can even try to contact the organizers to see if Anne and the organizers can bring it back, because her presentation, I don't want to do it myself. Of course, we can do it, but she's working in the environment together with the director of the strategy, and she will really give us a flavor. So bear with me. I will improvise a bit here, but this is what is required in this case. So I will go very quickly to my part of the presentation with the second part, and we'll give it the floor a bit later on, okay? Is that fine with you, Laura? Okay, there we go.
Sorry, I think Anne is trying to connect, and maybe she's trying to speak even if we cannot see her. So because she's connected, she's seeing us and she's seeing the slides.
But we don't,
let's
listen to her.
See if we can hear her.
No, I don't.
Okay, so this was the messages.
So, Anne, as you're listening, apparently, you will have to listen to us before, and then you will give us the second presentation, hopefully a bit later, okay? There we go. So, you see, Anne has put together a beautiful presentation that you will see a bit later. And now we go to my boring presentation, which I wanted to give for the second part, but it's the way it is. So there we go. What I wanted to tell you indeed is the real call itself. It is possibly the most boring part of the presentation, as I said, but on the other side is where the money is. So bear with me, because this is the most important part of the presentation for those who look for funding anyway. Again, what we're going to talk about here today is this particular area of the Green Deal call, as I mentioned before. The link that you see in the screen is possibly the most important part of my presentation, because this is where you have all the information of this call. This is where you will see exactly what is required, what you need to read, what you need to understand, what you need to interpret, and what you need to use to put together your presentation and your proposal to be evaluated. I'm talking to you, of course, as this is an info day, as potential participants in the call. I'm fully aware that some of you are here only to learn what is going on, but you have to understand that the important thing for us is also to make sure that participants on this call will come with the best proposals. Having said that, you will see that, of course, there is plenty of space in the proposals for society at large and for other people to join in the call anyway. So again, what I'm going to go immediately is to the presentation itself. You will see here, again, an awful text, very big text, but I took the liberty to highlight a few words, which I will possibly try to share with you. Again, before we start, just a little disclaimer, which is indeed that this presentation is, of course, only intended for sharing with you the main ideas. The legal text and the legal basis for this call, which is a significant amount of money, remains what is published in the call in itself. Again, that you can see here on the link. I don't know if you see my mouse when I move into the screens. Do you see that, Laura? Can I use? No, you don't see it. Okay, so then I don't do it. Again, so again, you see there a link to the topic itself again, which is the most important one. Then I will tell you how we structure the topics in Horizon 2020. I welcome Francisco Javier joining us, but I don't understand.
Good afternoon, colleagues.
There we go. So again, in Horizon 2020 and in FP7, we organize our topics in 3 different chapters. What we describe: the challenge, the scope, and the impact. It's quite a logical way of doing things in a way. And I will try to go very briefly together with you through the 3 parts. Again, not exhaustively. I will not read the whole text. This will be very boring. I will only select a few bullets, which I think are very significant, and within the bullets, even a few words that I really want you to keep in mind. I start with the challenge. First, as you see, we are looking for demonstrating and promoting systemic solutions for upscaling. Upscaling, of course, solutions for restoration of increasing diversity, and of course, in line with the Biodiversity Strategy for 2030. The most important part is demonstrating and promoting systemic solution for upscaling. We will come back to that again. But again, important that this is a project about demonstrating solutions. Okay? Second bullet I have here is, of course, is just a statement. Today, there are very few, Chawan back, very few restoration activities of ecosystems. And of course, they need to be upscale. They need to be integrated in today's governance and in today's investment and policy support landscapes. Again, upscaling again, solutions that need to go wider, and integration into governance and policy. Third bullet, investment. Clearly, changing and restoring ecosystem is something very expensive. It's beyond research. Even if we have a significant amount of money put aside for this topic, which we'll be very happy to use, it will require a substantial amount of investments. And for that proposal, we need to think about innovative, sustainable, and effective innovative funding, including cross-sectorial collaborations of different sectors to aiming at a real transformational change. So again, with this, I move to the next slide, which is already going to talk about the scope. The scope is indeed to provide large-scale demonstrators. Again, we need to show how upscaling and replication of best practices can be deployed at regional, national, and cross-border level. Again, 2 words, large-scale demonstrators deployed. You see, somebody was complaining I have a lot of text. It's only 2 words, but I just kept the original text to keep the connection to the legal text. Second one, of course, restore. In line with the Biodiversity Strategy for 2030, we are aiming at restoring degraded ecosystems. It's not just research, it's restoring them. So it's something very ambitious here. Again, action should demonstrate how this restoration of ecosystems and their services can be scaled up in collaboration with the stakeholders to make sure that we deliver social and economic benefits. So these are the keywords again there. You will read the text, but this is the only message I wanted to pass to you here. On the scope, you will see the text is very long as well. And again, I will go very quickly also through the major words. Just keep in mind that the goal requests that you should address all of the following issues. And they say all in bold, meaning that you cannot ignore any of them, and you will be evaluated against all these anyway. Again, together with the concerned communities, you will need to prepare a scalability plan, including the diffusion of innovative solutions and a process for commitments with governance and financial systems. So very ambitious is you need to really put together a serious plan that will convince the evaluators that you are going to be able to do this with the communities, with the governance, and with financial systems which you need to put in place. And finally, on this bullet, non-reversible and with continuity. We are not aiming at something that you do today for the next years, and then money is gone, and then the ecosystem is unfortunately degraded again, which happens very often. This is not what we aim. We want to have something which is continuously, and they will have a continuity even after the project is finished. As you see, this call is really ambitious, but I'm really convinced that we really need it anyway. Again, something very important as well here. The approaches should be based on existing knowledge from previous research, which has been funded both nationally and internationally, and also seek complementarity with the live projects, which have also funded many projects in this area. Important here, based on existing knowledge, which means that we are not here to develop new knowledge. We're going to use the knowledge. We're going to develop very innovative approaches to use the knowledge, you see? So again, something very, very particular. Again, here, another bullet, innovative funding, cross-sectorial collaboration, social participation, and sustainable and effective restoration effort. It's basically saying the same thing I said before, innovative funding and collaboration among the different sectors. The last bullet is very important. The project consortia must evidence that they have the right to undertake actions on the areas to be restored. This is fundamental. A group of researchers can have brilliant ideas, but they don't have the right to act on ecosystems. The ecosystems belong to somebody, and they are managed by somebody, which normally are associated to the regional, national governance schemes. Sometimes they might be even private. The consortium needs to show that whatever is proposed will be implemented. So without the involvement of the stakeholders, they will not fly. It's not about research, it's about implementing, okay? And then finally, of course, the projects will need to mobilize additional funding, which in some cases can be cash funding to complement the amount of money that Horizon 2020 will give. Could even be in-kind contributions, very often, investment which are already taking place, material investments, things which are already happening, which do not need necessarily to be new funding, but you can use them to pull them together to make it happen. Having said that, I will go to give you some additional information. I know the call is very long. Believe me, I tried to synthesize the most I could, and I believe I did a good job. Anyway, this is the additional information I really want you to keep today. First, the proposals under this topic, which, as you will see, will be generating 4, 5, 6, we don't know how many projects yet, will need to talk to each other. We'll need to find ways to cooperate with each other. And this should be foreseen even in the proposal. It's a complicated thing because you don't know what the proposal will look like, but you need to make sure that whatever will come out will be done in collaboration with your brother projects in the same call. And even beyond that, and this is the second part of this bullet, the projects should make sure that they really are going to talk to the other projects in the other parts of the Green Deal call. Here we're talking about possibly a huge amount of projects. Of course, we don't have to exaggerate. You will be selecting, of course, those projects which are related to you. I give you an example for you to understand. If there is a project on adaptation to climate change, if there is a project on forest fires in another area, which have clearly implications on ecosystem restoration issues, you better talk to them. I'm not going to ask you to establish a contact with a project on, sorry to say it, on airports, which we also have. Maybe that's irrelevant for your topic. So again, be logic, try to keep in mind the other content of the areas which are related to this, and just make a serious plan. Be logic. This is all we ask for here. Again, money, finally. Yes, of course, the topic, as you see in the slides, I hope you see the full slide. The whole topic has a budget dotation of 80 million euro in total. We expect to have different projects targeting different ecosystems. For proposals will be, in principle, and this is an estimate from the Commission, go from 16 to 25 million each. Again, you're perfectly entitled to propose bigger or smaller. This is an indication anyway. Of course, depending on the budgets that we get, we will see how many proposals we have. If we get proposal of 16 million euro, well, we have 5, exact. 5, 16, 80. That's fine. If we get bigger, we will get less projects. If we get smaller, we'll get... This is something we will see in the evaluation process, and my friends from the agency will have some troubles deciding what. To make things a bit more complicated, as ecosystems are very complex and are very diverse in general, we need to make sure that this does not go only to one type of ecosystems. So we have another condition in the call which forces us to have 2 proposals funded within the terrestrial or freshwater ecosystems, the continental side of it, let's put it like this, and 2 other proposals funding coastal or marine ecosystems, okay? The oceanic part together with the coastal. That is, of course, provided that the proposal will be evaluated positively and they receive the required quality. This is something that we need to keep in mind because we are really encouraging all types of ecosystems to come out with proposals, and we are aiming to have good proposals that will cover at least these 2 broad sides of ecosystems. On this is the additional information I want to give you. I'm getting very close to the end. So, Anne, get ready to start with your presentation that you should have made before myself, but we will. We are used to work together. I'm sure Anne will be able to do it anyway. Again, I hope you will not contradict much of what I say here anyway. Again, on the expected impact, what we have here is that actions, and this is very important, action should demonstrate how this transformational change through the restoration of ecosystems will deliver at large scale. But very important, we need first visible results and examples, both on land and sea, by 2024. Of course, with increasing projected benefits in the long term. This is quite a novelty for Horizon 2020. We will be signing contracts basically at the end of 2021, even October 2021. So projects will need to come very fast in 3 years period with results. Of course, when we talk about restoration activities and not research, this is feasible. Research normally has a much broader timeline. Here we're talking about a very particular activity, and therefore we still believe we can still make it, okay? But this is important. Then, of course, and more important as well, the change should really support a just transition. We cannot abandon anybody in the way. We need to take into account vulnerable regions and communities, and especially to help these communities and regions to face the changes that we are together being faced on climate, on environment, on economy, on social conditions, and unfortunately, as we cannot avoid mentioning it, on health issues, which are anyway connecting all these things together. Okay, I didn't mention, you're going to allow me to go back to my previous slide, because this is also important, and this is the last thing I will possibly say soon. I say type of action, innovation action. That is very important for us. In Horizon 2020, we have many different types of actions, mainly research and innovation actions, and innovation actions. There are others, but these are the main ones. This one is an innovation action, meaning that is not a research and innovation action, meaning that is intended specifically to provide demonstration and solutions very close to the market. We are not talking about the initial side of the research and innovation cycle, dealing with basic research activities. We're talking about the end part of the research cycle, which is basically the demonstration and solutions. That's why this is also very important. The funding for this call will be, in theory, 70% of the total cost. And I say in theory because, of course, there is exceptions there, and non-profit organizations that will be associated to the project, like research organizations, will be still getting 100% of the cost. This is important to know, but private organizations will be still getting 70%, which is anyway huge. I go here, of course. This last bullet here, the 3 dots, are very important. They mean that indeed there are many, many more things that you have to read. Okay, so again, keep in mind that this is just an illustration, as I said before, of the main issues. I hope I managed more or less to give you a flavor of what we're talking about here. But again, read the call itself. And of course, if you have questions, come back to us. We will be able to help you with some of them. Others will need to be interpreted by you, because of course, we expect you to build real proposals. It's not us to build the new proposals. Again, with this, I should be starting the question and answers, but I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to do it back. So I'm going to go back now that we have the pleasure to have Anne with us again. Don't go away again. And then I'm going to go back to the origin of the presentation, which is possibly a nice way. Now we put the policy conditions, and we will have a double check if everything I said makes sense or not. I hope it does. So again, wait a minute. There we go. This is the EU Biodiversity Strategy for 2030. I mute myself, and the floor is yours, Anne.
Okay, thank you very much, Jose, and sorry for deserting you earlier. I hope I'll stick around for a little while now and not be booted out of the system again. If I do get booted out, I guess it's because you think I'm about to say something that contradicts you, so I know that, right? Okay, I am going to have to tell you when to switch slides since you have the finger on that, so maybe we can already say next. Go to the next slide. Yeah.
Coming.
Okay, so I think the important thing to remember here is that this call has not been made in a vacuum. It's not, as Jose has already said, just a research academic program. It's something that has a real purpose, and it's a policy purpose. And like all of the other calls under this European Green Deal call, it's supposed to be a contribution to the implementation of the EU's, in this case, biodiversity strategy. And it's focusing on some of the very specific needs we have for implementing the objectives of the strategy. So what I'm going to try to do is give you a bit of an overview of why we have the biodiversity strategy and what it aims to achieve. So first of all, just to recall that the biodiversity strategy is one of the set of strategies under the European Green Deal. And you certainly already know that, but it's important to know because it's part of a set. The European Green Deal communication itself set out the framework for all of the other elements. And in the main communication, it already announced back in 2019 that we were going to be putting forward a biodiversity strategy that should outline how the EU would be contributing our part to addressing the global challenge of stopping the ongoing loss of biodiversity. But having said that, it certainly is linked to a number of the other strategies. It's most closely linked to the farm to fork strategy, which in fact was adopted the very same day. But it's also very closely linked to the objectives of the Climate Pact and the climate law, because healthy ecosystems and a benign climate go hand in hand. Next, please. Next slide. Okay. I'm sure I don't need, no, go back one, please. I'm sure I don't need to dwell on the urgency of the biodiversity crisis. I expect everybody in this virtual room is aware of it. But the crisis did make headline news in lots of newspapers last year with the publication of the EPBES Global Assessment, which made it clear that species globally, including in Europe, are disappearing at an alarming rate, and that the health of our ecosystems that we and all the other species on the planet depend on is deteriorating more rapidly than ever. So that's why it's an urgent problem. That's why we have to do something about it. But in addition, we now have a window of opportunity, we hope, to improve the situation at the global level. And that is because there is a process ongoing to develop a post-2020 global framework for biodiversity, which we hope to be adopted at the Convention of the Parties of the Convention of Biological Diversity. So our biodiversity strategy was developed partly as a vehicle to show how the EU would provide leadership, excuse me, in this global context. And now, over the past months, we've seen yet another reason for the urgency of addressing our biodiversity crisis, and that is that we need to make sure that we really mainstream biodiversity considerations into our recovery from the ongoing economic crisis from the coronavirus. The catchword is build back better. We have an opportunity to do it, and certainly better includes making sure that we have healthy ecosystems and biodiversity that really is needed to underlie our society as a whole. Next, please. And this picture, which you've probably, many of you seen, the wedding cake illustration of the Sustainable Development Goals, really shows why biodiversity is so important to building back better. Biodiversity, both on land and on sea, is really the bedrock for our society and for our economy. The loss of biodiversity is eroding the foundations of our economies itself, of our livelihoods, of food security, of health, the quality of life worldwide. So this is why the biodiversity strategy, as part of the European Green Deal, is seen as part of our new growth strategy, because it really is there for ensuring the future of our society economically, socially, as well as for biodiversity per se. So if we go on to the next slide, let's look a little bit at the different elements of the biodiversity strategy. It's announces biodiversity strategy for 2030 because we are looking on a 10-year time frame. So it is full of commitments and targets in over this next decade. Inside the strategy, there are a number of earlier dates for some of the specific commitments. There are four main areas that are covered in the strategy. One is the extension of the EU-wide network of protected areas on land and at sea. This is the protect nature component of the strategy. So the idea here is to build upon the existing Natura 2000 areas with a broader network of protected areas, including areas that are protected at national or regional level, some more strictly than others. But this is to maintain what we have and make sure it doesn't get worse. The second component of the strategy is enabling a necessary transformative change. We know that if we want to address the problems of nature and biodiversity, we really need to set into motion a new strengthened governance framework to address the drivers of biodiversity loss, of ecosystem degradation. So this means ensuring better implementation, tracking progress on existing commitments, improving knowledge, making financing available, and making sure that nature is integrated into public and business decision making across the spectrum and not seen as kind of a niche policy area which is separate from everything else. I've already mentioned the fact that this is part of a global challenge that the EU wants to lead. We want to show at the upcoming Convention on Biological Diversity meeting that we really are taking action ourselves. We're not just telling the rest of the world what they need to do, but that we're making some commitments, we're moving ahead, and this is what we expect the rest of the world to do too. The fourth element is the one I'd like to dwell on a little bit more, and that's the one that is linked to this call. And this is the part of the biodiversity strategy that calls for the development of an EU nature restoration plan. If you look on the next slide, and in fact, there are now two more slides that will show the series of concrete commitments and actions which the strategy announces for the purpose of restoring degraded ecosystems across the EU, both restoring them and ensuring that they're then managed sustainably so that they don't become degraded again. I think Jose already mentioned that in the projects under this call, we don't want to see progress on the ground which is going to disappear as soon as the project ends. That's obviously not the idea. You can see from this list, I'm not going to go through and read them all, but one of the very important elements is that we expect to put forward already next year a proposal for legally binding targets for restoration. That's going to go through the normal legal process, policy development process inside the EU. But we've already started working on this because we feel that there's a gap there. It's something that is not covered in existing legislation sufficiently and certainly not on a broad enough scale. There are also a number of much more specific commitments, specific ways that we want to see changes in the way that we use and manage land. So this is about increasing organic farming, it's reducing the use and risk of pesticides, it's planting additional trees, addressing the decline in pollinators. And if you go on to the next slide, you'll see there are a few more specific commitments related to remediation of contaminated soil sites, addressing red list species, reducing bycatch, etc. I think it's really important to see from this list, I think you can understand that when we talk about restoration, we're not just talking about taking land and putting it back into some kind of pre-human pristine state. Certainly, there are some areas where land is already, and perhaps in the future even more, should be strictly protected. But what we're talking about here is raising the overall condition of the ecosystems across the EU and essentially reversing the process of degradation that has been going on over the past decades. So in some cases, yes, it might be restoring land to a near pristine state, but restoration is also about taking actions to change how land is used and managed and to restore its functionality, to make sure that the ecosystems that are on the land can once again provide the services that, when they're healthy, they can provide. So, for instance, the conversion of intensively used, unsustainably used land into a different form of land use which respects ecological principles and works in harmony with nature, that's restoration, even if it's not wild, untouched land. Um, Certainly, restoration does not just refer to areas inside protected areas. So, we're talking about restoration of all of the different types, potentially of all the different types of ecosystems across the EU. And we already know that there are lots of small scale experiments and experiences which have gone on. Jose referred to experiments and experiences from the LIFE program. There's certainly programs under Old Horizon programs that have also addressed land restoration. I think if you look under structural funds, cohesion funds, you'll find examples. But the big question now is how to do this at the vast scale that we need to have done. So I'm not, yeah, perhaps it's not research, and I maybe don't use the words research and innovation the same way that DGRTD does, but there is a knowledge need there. But it's a need about how to upscale, how to take this technical knowledge that already exists and see how you can apply it over a large area. Because if we're not able to do it over a large area at a large scale, we're not going to make the difference on the ground that we need to make in order to reach the targets that we've set out in the biodiversity strategy and which are needed for the future of our society. So this kind of brings us back again to one of the other components of the biodiversity strategy. If you go on to the next slide, and that is that what we're trying to do in the biodiversity strategy, we're trying to do specific things on the ground, but really we're trying to enable a transformative change. And if we want to effectuate a widespread restoration, it's not just a technical issue, it's how to work with the landowners, with the land managers, how to transition to different types of land uses that are sustainable economically, but also that they're societally accepted and even welcomed. So this means working with the landowners, working with the land managers, working with businesses that have an impact on ecosystems, and see how to engage them so that they can become actors in this large scale transition that we need, how they can contribute to making restoration over a large scale possible. So these projects definitely need to do more. They need to have an impact on the ground. They need to actually do restoration. But at the same time, they need to find how to do it in the best way over a large area. Are there regulations that need modification so that the landowners can engage more easily? Are there ways of mobilizing finance to make this more possible over a large scale? So again, it's not classical, technical, academic research. It's innovation, working with the different stakeholders and finding real solutions that will work and that make it possible to do ecosystem restoration over a large scale. So if you just go on to my last slide, I leave you there with the link. If you want more details about the biodiversity strategy, you can find the full text there. Certainly I or my colleagues could answer further questions you might have about it. But for now, I hope that's given you a flavor of what we're doing, particularly in the area of restoration and the importance of really finding solutions that work, not just that are going to produce nice research reports, not that are going to make a nice thesis that somebody gets a nice degree on it. No, we're trying to make change. We're trying to make change on the ground, and we're looking for support under this call from projects that can show how to make it happen, to really make it possible to have this change that we need to make sure that we have a biodiversity that's healthy, have ecosystems that can support our lifestyle, our society as we want it. Thank you. That's what I wanted to say. And it didn't crash. And I didn't contradict you too much, did I, Jose?
Not at all. I mean, indeed, I think it was even good what happened, because it's always much nicer to have the nice part of the presentation at the end. So we had you as a dessert, which was great. It was a great presentation. I think it was very much in line with what I said. Even my approach was a bit more bureaucratic and DG RTD style. You really provide a very good frame for what we have to do here. I think, honestly, we have a very clear understanding of this already. Let me give you, just before we enter into the questions, so we will go immediately, just something which is a bit internal for the Commission, but this way of working is also a novelty also in the Commission. This topic that we're talking about here has been indeed produced together by DG Environment and his colleagues, and by DG Research and Innovation. It's not one side. And that's why I think it's a very good example of showing how things can be done, really targeting the real policy needs. But this is just an internal comment I wanted to make. Now, I will try to find my way in the slides to evidentiate that we are moving to the questions and answer session. I'm already thank you for that. I'm really thanking already Laura and Javier, because they have done a great job. You may have seen already in the right side of your screen, there is a section on published questions that they have been already filtering, that you have been already putting during the presentation. I thank you all. I went through them already a bit, and I really think they are very targeted, and they will really be very helpful to provide additional insights on this discussion. So I will start, if you allow me here, to give the floor to our friends from the agency. So I will select a couple of questions which are clearly agency related. Of course, they could answer to most of them, and then we will continue. Let me see if I find here. I saw a question here from, where is it? Publish. Well, in fact, let me see if I find it here. There we go. A question from Anne Colombal, which is asking, what is the deadline for presenting the proposals, and when can we expect the project to start? So I give the floor to the agency, Javier or Laura. There we go. Unmute your micro.
I did now. Okay, thank you. Very good afternoon. Well, the deadline for presenting applications is, and correct me if I'm wrong, Laura, is the 26th of January. And we expect to sign the grant with the applicant within the expected time of 8 months, which will mean by the end of September. And then the project could start already the beginning of October. If the consortium wants to start on that date, it could start maybe a little bit later if that is agreed. But the signature should be at the end of September.
Thank you, Javier. It's very clear, and everything should be anyway relatively clear also in the call which has been published already.
And just to mention, you said that the start date of the project could be, let's say, negotiated according to, for example, to the ecosystem characteristics. So it could fit maybe some cyclic ecosystem.
Fantastic. So I will continue with you, Javier and Laura, because there is a mixed question which is addressing EASME and possibly a bit us in the GRTD. It's a question from Esther Phillips, which she's asking, developing joint deliverables and dedicate resources to develop this sounds almost impossible, since proposers have no idea on which consortia propose and which will be funded. How will EASME support here? I will start a little answer from my side, and I will give the floor to EASME, of course, for this as well. Clearly, as I mentioned during my presentation, you're right, we don't know what project we will have on the table. So obviously, you cannot put on the proposal, I will collaborate with A, B, C, D on these particular projects. So basically, what is really asked for you is first that you give an idea that you have really looked into the call itself, that you know there will be topics, of course, on marine ecosystems, on land ecosystems, that you basically have a forecast of resources that you will devote to that. Of course, you cannot develop exactly what, because you need to know exactly who will be on the other side. But yes, you need to have a forecast of resources to do that. Okay. Now, I don't know, of course, the second part of the question is how will EASME support here? And of course, I will leave the floor to EASME, even if we could even anticipate an answer, because EASME is the one who is going to evaluate all these projects. They will be the first one who knows who is in there, and they will be the one negotiating the contracts, which will be basically putting people together when they have to be together. But I leave this second part to you, Javier.
Thank you, Jose. I will leave the floor to Laura because she's leading actually one of the task forces that are in charge of the clustering projects on database solutions. And this is a similar process, of course. I mean, the project must reserve some of the budget to do this clustering, or these common activities will be dealt with or will be refined and clarified when the projects are going to sign during the, let's say, negotiation phase. But I pass the floor to Laura to be more clear on that.
Thank you, Javier. So indeed, I don't think anyone can identify the content of the specific joint deliverables. But what is important, as is being said, is that the resources for identifying these deliverables, what can be the joint deliverables, are there. So resources to go to meetings with the other projects, to work in common reports, or to work on common things that help us to identify these joint deliverables and producing them. And EASME will be for sure supporting this process of identifying these and implementing this. What is important is that you think that this requires resources. And if you don't allocate a budget for this, it will not be possible, no?
Thank you, Laura and Javier. Very, very clear answer. I will give the floor now to Anne on some more specific issues, which I'm sure she will be the best one to answer. Is a question from Giulio Formenti, which is, reading the call, I was surprised not to see any definition of biodiversity or genetic diversity, one of the most promising scientific to measure and define it. Javier, close the micro. Could you comment on that? Is that clear to you? Do you see the answer, the question, Anne?
I do not see the question, but I understood it was about what is the definition of biodiversity. Well,
he's also asking about genetic biodiversity, which is, of course, one of the promising areas for this person.
Yeah, I mean, biodiversity also includes genetic biodiversity. That's not excluded, but it's the broader definition as used by IPBES. I don't have a quote in front of me, and I don't even know that anyone has given a very specific definition, but I would suggest going back and looking at the biodiversity strategy itself, and seeing the way it is considered in the IPBES report. So it's the variety of species, and yes, also populations that are present on the earth. And so it's a question of looking for complexity. A healthy ecosystem has different chains of different species. It is not a monoculture. It doesn't have a very small number of species. A healthy ecosystem will have a large number of species. And that's what we're talking about at the global level. That's what we're talking at the European level. I don't have a specific definition to quote to you at the moment, but if that's something that the person who's asking it wants to pursue further offline, I can send on the question to one of our experts in the biodiversity unit to see if they can give you a more complete answer.
Thank you, Anne. Excellent. I mean, we invite you here to work, so you will continue working here. So I'm going to give you two questions now, which I believe are very much related to your activities. One is from Boris Barov, which is asking if proposed restoration actions in, e.g., Natura 2000 sites will be officially included in the management plan. That's one question. And let me ask you the second one, which is also connected to somehow the content. Is a question from Sandy Adriansens, which is asking if there is a place for urban green infrastructure in this call. So the two of them, you can address one after the other. That would be nice. Thanks.
Yes, I mean, the basic answer is that all types of ecosystems and biodiversity are potentially included, and it's up to the project proponent to explain the value and importance of restoring whatever ecosystems and biodiversity they're targeting. But that definitely does include urban biodiversity. It would also potentially include areas in protected areas. Those are kind of perhaps almost the two extremes, although perhaps remediation of contaminated sites would be even more on the kind of not pristine restoration scale. So there's no type of ecosystem that is excluded. It certainly does not need to be an all natural ecosystem. It certainly can involve actions which are already planned in a management plan. But as I said, the issue here is not just showing how to do it in one specific area, but showing how this can be upscaled over a large area. I hope that answers the questions.
For the urban part?
Yeah, I said, yeah, the
Okay.
urban ones are definitely not excluded. Now, this doesn't mean that just having a project where you're going to, show a tiny little plot in your backyard. I mean, that's not the scale and the impact that we're looking for. But a project that would look at large scale restoration of green areas that are managed with ecological principles in urban areas, yes. And I stress that managed with ecological principles, because we wouldn't consider restoration taking an area which is already not particularly polluted anything and planting a monoculture. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about restoration that contributes to biodiversity, that contributes to healthy functioning ecosystems. So urban areas certainly can be included in that, but it has to be something with a large impact in terms of increasing biodiversity, increasing ecosystem services that can be produced over this large area from a healthy ecosystem.
Thank you, Anne. I mean, as I have the privilege to be the moderator, I will keep a couple of very simple questions for me, because they are very easy to answer. So I will answer Eva Klutcher. She wants to know what project direction is expected. I mentioned that the first results should be visible by 2024. Could project have a longer duration? The answer is obviously yes. 2024 could be an intermediate step in which it is required, and there will be obviously a deliverable clearly there showing the results achieved. Of course, the project can continue longer. And as I said before, even after the project will finish, what this call is expecting is that the efforts will be continued, even if the project is stopped. So again, the answer is yes. I have a second question, which is also very simple. That's why I will answer without even asking for help from my friends from EASMED. For me, it is unclear whether it is an RIA or an IA. It's my mistake, because it was clearly my slide is a IA, is an innovation action, not a RIA. That is one of the slides. And of course, the question that it is only about demonstrators and upscaling, I would not say it is only about that, because when you read, and you need to read the annexes of the call and the work program, IAs are described basically targeting demonstration, upscaling of this type of activities. But they certainly do not exclude other activities which might be needed, even research innovation activities that are needed to be performed to arrive to the final destination. I don't know if Javier wants to add something on this, because it's a very tricky issue. If so,
it is an innovation action. You can see that in the call clearly. It is a large budget because it involves a lot of a large amount of implementation. From our point of view, it is clear that it's an innovation action that may need punctually some little data research, but the focus is in the innovation and in the implementation.
Very good. So, okay, I will give one maybe for Anne. From Boris Barov, please explain the requirements for who owns the land where restoration actions will take place. Before Anne answers, well, you can comment also on the fact that the prices of buying land is not part of this call, But anyway, you can go ahead on that.
Okay, no, and the point here is that obviously you're supposed to have impact on the ground. And if you're going to be doing things on the ground, you better make sure you're doing them legally and have permission to do them. So, I mean, that's the bureaucratic answer. But the sort of more thematic answer would be that the idea here is to be working with whoever the landowners and the land managers are, precisely to find out what works for them, what can be socially acceptable, what can help incentivize them to do this type of upscaling, this type of restoration over large areas. So I would say that it would be very unlikely to have a project where you're not involving the landowner and the land manager. You might also be involving, for instance, the local authorities. It depends really on the land, because you might be working on private land, you might be working on public land, and there's going to be probably a public land manager that you would involve. But I would find it hard to see a good project that doesn't have that kind of partnership. So I would certainly encourage you to reach out, for instance, to local authorities, to reach out to park managers, to reach out to large landowners, maybe associations of landowners, different associations of types of economic actors who use the land, and see what kind of consortia you can build up involving them. They're probably not going to be present in the European RNI days, so that's going to require some activity and some networking and some searching for people outside of this forum. But I think that's how you're going to make a good project.
Fantastic, Anne. I take a question from me from John Sunny Wonder. Sorry if I don't pronounce correctly, which I find very, very useful in this context. You're questioning if demonstrating, promoting, and upscaling are the main focus. What is the role of research? Me, from DG Research and Innovation, I am very inclined to answer to you. You say as well, are you envisioning the coordinating main applicants within this topic to be public bodies or universities? Thanks in advance. So again, to the second question, I'm not envisioning anything. We cannot envision anything. This is up to the participants, in the sense that who is going to be the coordinator of the project has to be decided and agreed among the consortia. However, I do believe that it is obvious that there is a huge role of research. Maybe not in, as I said before, and maybe if I was wrong when I said it, by carrying out fundamental research. But of course, research is in the hands of researchers today. Research is owned and is even known by the research organizations which have been funded over the last years. So I can obviously not imagine that they will not be part of a consortia which is exploring this research. Of course, they will need to have a possibly different mindset and to be there to make sure that the research that have been producing, whatever research is still left to carry out, is used and implemented. But in my view, and this is my interpretation, but I think it's just common sense, they need to be there. As coordinator or not, this is not up to me to decide. But again, very important that there is a role for researchers here, together with the other parts of the equipment, as Anne just described, the landowners, and you need to establish a dialogue in which this is happening, in which research is indeed, as I explained in the call, used and exploited. Again, also Anne mentioned something before I think is relevant in this context. When we talk about research and innovation, sometimes we tend to think about very complicated things on the biological cycle of this particular pollutant, or the biological cycle or chemical cycle of whatever organism on an ecosystem. This is science, of course. But there is another part of science and innovation which I think Anne hinted towards, which is the social innovation, which is the financial innovation, is innovating on how we do things. This is an innovation which is not so easy to categorize in terms of PhDs or in terms of laboratory experiments, but is very much needed. And in this particular topic, anything that can be developed in terms of innovative funding, innovative governance, involving civil society and other societies is innovation, and this cost, and you need to get people on board. So I'm sorry if I elaborate a bit on this question, but this allows me to clarify this, which I think is fundamental for this. Having said that,
maybe can I add on to that? I mean, I think it's also important to distinguish between different types of research, different fields of research. I think I think it would be appropriate potentially, and again, it's obviously up to the proponents to make the proposal, but to involve natural scientists, because you understand the physical interactions on the ground. But equally, I would think it would be essential to involve some kind of social scientists, people who are looking at governance models, people who are looking at economic incentives, even perhaps people who are looking at the intersection between psychology and economics. I think those are all areas of academic study. They're areas of research. They're areas where there are academic institutions who have experts who are interested and who might possibly want to come into such a project. And that kind of research and innovation, as long as it's applied to coming up with some real solutions on the ground, could certainly be part of a project.
I can only endorse that with a minor remark, provided that it's integrated in the global context. A proposal which is only doing that will not fly. Of course, in the context that it is the added value, and don't forget that, of course, the citizens' opinion on those particular issues is fundamental. If you don't have the citizens on board on this will never happen. You cannot change the way we operate an ecosystem if the citizens and the society has something against that. And I think you know something about that. So again, fully subscribe. Now, maybe another question for you, Anne. Oh, that's complicated. What is meant by large scale? Is there a definition? Ale, así.
Yeah, no, there is no precise definition, but obviously the larger the impact you're having, the larger the scale will in general produce a more interesting proposal. But I think it depends also on what ecosystems you're talking about, to what kind of extent you can realistically think about doing restoration. So no, but certainly your backyard is not large scale. Okay. Maybe I can just answer one other question that I noticed. It's disappeared again now, but somebody was just asking about what will be in the 2021 proposal. Just to say, it has not been drafted yet, so no, I cannot elaborate on it more. As you probably know, for any legal proposal to be made in the Commission, it needs to go through a full process defined under the better regulation rules. So what we're doing now is to start some initial studies and do impact assessments on what type of legally binding targets we ought to propose and what their impact would be. So you have to be patient on that, but there will be an open consultation also during the process of the development of the legislation. So if you keep an eye on the public consultations online, you could also participate in that process.
Thank you, Anne. So one more question, which is, I think you already answered. What is the role of cities and urban biodiversity play in this call? You already mentioned if you want to add something.
No, I think, I mean,
You did already cover that.
It's a possible target for a project.
Clear. Then something which is also technical. For this call, action should restore degraded ecosystems. This is literally stated in the call. Can you elaborate on the definition of degraded, i.e. the extent of severity implied? There's a question from Anonymous.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I'm afraid I'm going to give you the same type of answer. The more improvement you're showing on important ecosystems, habitats, the better the proposal will be. So we're looking for something that's going to have an impact on important habitats, significantly improving their status. Now, if you're starting with a monoculture, which is perhaps in active use as a monoculture, intensive use at the moment, and you're bringing it back to a semi-natural state where you're doing agroforestry, agroecology, that would be one type of project. There you're starting from something which is perhaps not very severely degraded, but that depends. On the other hand, if you're starting from something which is contaminated soils, where the soil has been completely destroyed, if you can bring it up to a reasonable status where there is some biodiversity, where there is some interaction between species, where there's an evolving ecosystem which will have natural processes on it, that would also be a possibility. So I think it's not so much where you're starting from, but the amount of restoration, the amount of added value you're having to the ecosystem and its services that you're targeting. So you have to make this case in your application for why you're making a significant difference, why what you're doing will be part of the solution to the ongoing problem now of the decline of ecosystems and the decline of habitats. How are you putting the trend back over a sufficiently large area with a sufficiently large amount of restoration? So you need to make that argument in your case. There's no specific cutoff point.
Okay, another question on the geographical and international collaboration, if there is any geographical preferences here. Here, I would possibly take the floor very quickly. Of course, international dimension in this whole context is very important, and already explained it already in the context of the Convention of the Biological Diversity. And in principle, Horizon 2020 is a very open program to international collaboration. There is no geographical preferences indicated in the call. They are welcome. And I will take just the opportunity to give you a general answer to most of your questions, which I think is important. There is no one single answer to any of your questions. There is a huge degree of interpretation that will be submitted to your proposals. And this is the way it is. We are not talking about having it right or having it wrong. It's 3 or 5 or 6. That's the right answer. The evaluation process, which will maybe elaborated a bit by colleagues from EASME, implies that there will be a group of experts selected by the characteristics and the knowledge they have in this field, and they themselves will be judging on the different criteria, on the different requirements, and giving you a score which is going to be highly subjective. Sorry to say it, there is no black and white. It's not something that you take a proposal in a machine and it comes automatically with 14 points. That would be nice, right, Javier? But it's not the way it goes. It goes very complicated. It involves very heavy discussions among the experts. And at the end of the day, what I'm trying to tell you is here, of course, you need to make the best proposal, and you need to convince the evaluators that your proposal is the best formula to get the maximum value for the money you're investing. And this applies to basically everything that you will be describing. Having said that, I go to another question here on NGOs. The question is from Konstantin Andonov. Are NGOs eligible to apply as lead partners? I take the liberty to answer as well. In principle, any legal entity, which is a legal entity, which therefore is registered, and NGOs, there's no problem with that, should be eligible to apply as lead partners or as beneficiary of the call. Of course, it depends on the type of project you have, and it depends on the capacity that the NGO or any other partner will have, because of course, leading an activity like this one will require an important resources. NGOs have them, and I'm fully in favor with NGOs, so that's not the point. So again, no formula here to say yes or no. Again, make sure that your proposal that you make is going to fly, and whoever is going to be the coordinator of the proposal will do the job that he has to do, managing a big budget, in any case, which has to be distributed among the different partners anyway. I don't know, you want to add something on this, Javier?
Yes, well, just to mention that the capability of the coordinator to coordinate a proposal is one of the sub-criteria for the evaluation. So this is taking into consideration how much capacity this coordinator has to manage a project of this complexity, because we expect projects with many partners and with high complexity. So it is up to the applicant to convince the evaluator that this coordinator has everything that needs to have. Of course, the more experience of the coordinator to manage this kind of project, the more happy the evaluators are going to be.
And there are good NGOs that could do this. So we don't do anything, okay? So again, a question that I love, because we were talking about it yesterday, and we were sure that somebody will ask this question. It's a question from Anonymous, who's telling us if a project can be working at the same time terrestrial and marine ecosystem, e.g. a delta. Voila. I would take the liberty to say, obviously, yes. I mean, we cannot, I mean, here we have to be scientifically sounded. The conditions to discriminate different ecosystems is just basically to establish an equilibrium. If the evaluators receive a good proposal, which is indeed scoring both coastal and land, fine. I mean, I don't know if I can elaborate on that, but I guess something which I'm sure it's going to happen in an evaluation is that logic and common sense will prevail. And of course, it will be no sense to exclude a delta because it's neither terrestrial or marine anyway. But Anna, I don't know if you want to say anything on this.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with your answer, but I would also add that actually, to me, a delta is a coastal ecosystem, so it would fall under that category. But yes, certainly we do not want to exclude any types of ecosystems, and deltas are very interesting ecosystems to work on, so certainly not excluded.
To make it even more complicated, I agree with you on the delta thing, but nothing prevents a topic to bring a delta and a terrestrial ecosystem in the same project and to develop something together. And I mean, it's completely free. The call is completely open. And in that case, yes, you will have a delta or even a marine ecosystem. And maybe in the same consortium, somebody dealing with something which is inland. Again, just be logic and just present proposals which are going to convince the experts. And at the end, we will deal with that categorization, if it's inland or coastal. This is something that we'll have to deal with later on, and I leave this to Javier and to the evaluators to fight for whatever. Okay. Oh my God. I really apologize. It's taking a bit longer, but I really believe that both me and my colleagues would really like to answer all the questions. I see many interesting questions, and if we stay a bit longer, we still have until 6. We will finish a bit earlier because we have been lucky to have one only topic. So we keep it a bit longer, but I really don't want to leave any question and answer because, by the way,
Jose, if we can take now the question from Jana Letimaki, saying that because it's talking about because you know this special condition that we are going to fund 2 of the coastal or marine environments and then terrestrial, no? So in this case, where we have a mixture, it will be also the responsibility of the evaluators to say if it is really a mixture or if it is just like say 95% terrestrial, 5% marginal marine. No? So in that case, we want to assure that the number of projects that are going to be funded have a wide enough area of action.
Okay, thank you. So a question for Jose, good, on visible results from Marian Harris. How this will be assessed in proposals? Ecosystem change may take longer than 2.5 years to determine. What can I tell you? This is a problem of evaluators. I mean, they will need to assess, and basically evaluating proposal is basically comparing one with others. And there will be one proposal which will be more convincing about the possibility to implement effective changes in the period that we are asking for, and others that will be not as easy to do. Obviously, we will not know. So it's, again, as I said before, a very intellectual, complicated process that evaluators need to go through. But yes, there is no magic formula, and it's a matter of showing how the impact and the changes that will be visible will be in place. Of course, something else is that, of course, what you promise at the end of the day has to be implemented. And this will be more in the monitoring of the projects. If you have promised to deliver A, B, C, D, and you don't deliver, of course, you will have problems even to get the funds that you applied for. But that's a different story.
Maybe
Okay.
I can come in on that one too. Yeah, I think there's a difference between actually having the ecosystem fully restored and have set the process in motion. And obviously, for lots of ecosystems, 2.5 years, it's not going to be fully restored. Of course not. But if actions have been taken so that then the natural processes will continue with the restoration and that it's on a kind of guaranteed one-way street, I think that would count as having the impact on the ground. I think that's important to say, because certainly, I mean, if you're going to be looking at a forest ecosystem that you're trying to plant on land, trees take a lot longer to grow than 2.5 years. So I think it needs to be understood in that sense, that there have been sufficient actions so that the ecosystem change is engaged, that the process is started, and the direction is committed in the 2.5 years.
Okay, thanks. So we'll continue. We will possibly skip some of the questions which are very technical, because indeed we are not in a position here to determine if we're going to deal with desertification or with organic agroecology. This is, again, a general answer. This has to be put into the context of the proposal, and the evaluators will have to decide. Of course, let's not get into these little things, because, of course, we cannot answer to you on these issues. The way PV in agriculture, why not? I mean, these questions, of course, I cannot even judge.
I can answer the one on organic and agroecology if you'd like.
I know you want. Go ahead.
No, just to say, I mean, that's not a consideration for this call. That's what was in the biodiversity strategy. And the reason we set a target specifically on organic is because there's a clear definition in the EU legislative framework. And so it's where we can have a definition that we can measure against. That certainly does not mean that we don't think other agroecological measures are good. And other types of agroecological measures might indeed be applicable in some of these projects. So you shouldn't consider that because the target is on organic, other types of agroenvironmental measures are excluded by this call. And indeed, in fact, other types of agroenvironmental measures are covered by CAP measures also. It's just for the specific target, we needed something that was defined and could be clearly measured.
To continue on agriculture, I saw a question there which is quite interesting as well. Where did I see it here? Yeah, the main land managers in Europe are obviously farmers. Is their participation encouraged in project consortia? And to you.
If you're planning to work on agricultural land, it'd be pretty good to involve the farmers.
That's an obvious answer. The question is not if, the question is how. And that's what you have to figure out. A very innovative way to involve farmers associations, landowners, to make sure that at the end, the ecosystem, which includes the whole thing, will be affected, including, of course, agriculture. Let's not forget about, and forestry. I mean, we talk about other things anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it depends which habitats you're working on. And I mean, there might be some habitats where there's not agricultural use of the land. So obviously in those projects, you wouldn't involve farmers. But I would think that there would be quite a number of types of projects I could imagine where you would want to involve farmers.
So a quick answer to Karin Whale. The coordination has to be coordinated by EU institution? Obviously not. The coordinator has to be a legal entity of an EU member state. This is true. But the EU institutions have only the role to facilitate the process. EASME will be following the projects, but certainly we are not coordinating the projects. We are certainly managing the European funding part. Okay, that's clear. Okay. Okay, funding. Maybe this is for you, Javier. Why is funding for companies 70% and the other 100%? Especially for restoration, where companies will clearly produce the marine structures.
Well, this is part of the rules for participation that are established at a very, very wide spectrum. So we are not here in the position to really to specify why it's 70 or 100. Every participant, every consortium that applies for this course are deemed to have understood and have agreed with the rules of participation that are there publicly.
Yes, that's clear. How many years should the project last? There is no minimum or maximum indicated. In this particular case, of course, there is an indication of results to be provided by 2024. So clearly, this should not be shorter than that. But of course, they can be longer. There is no clear indication. But again, logic. If you plan a project for 15 years, possibly will not be very nicely evaluated because they will not be seen as delivering in time. Again, it's just to be logic here. What else do we have here? Possibly the last one I see here, and I think we're going to interrupt very soon. You can, of course, contact EASME and ask for any particular question. The question is for Anne again. Do you focus on natural-based solutions? Anne?
Yeah, sorry, I was just unmuting. I mean, the goal here is to restore healthy ecosystems which will be able to provide nature-based solutions to societal problems. So if you've done your restoration project well, your restored ecosystem perhaps will help prevent flooding, perhaps will be a carbon sink, perhaps will be a habitat that's going to have birds and insects in it who act as pollinators. So the end result should certainly be ecosystems that provide nature-based solutions. Now, if part of the restoration itself involves nature-based solutions, it's so much the better, but that is up to you to say how you are going to do the restoration. And it's the end goal and the provision of nature-based services, nature-based solutions by the restored ecosystem that we're interested in mostly. Now, it might be an added value to show how nature can help itself also, but that's really up to you to say what type of restoration you're going to do. And as I say, it's not just the technical part, it's really looking at the governance part, the societal part, and how to make it work over a large scale.
Thank you very much. So, dear friends, I think we're getting to the end of this side here. I believe we have managed to cover most of the questions. I apologize if some of them are still pending or not properly interpreted. This is part of this business. Of course, come back to us if you really want to have any indication on how this will work or not. On this, I really want to thank again you all for having participated to this and for the very, very pertinent questions. We have also learned some of the issues that possibly we didn't think about before. I thank, of course, Anne and my colleagues from EASME for having been with us all this time and having helped us for doing this anyway. And what can I tell you? I wish you a very nice end of the day. And I wish that in 2024, we will be here together celebrating the super change we have produced on Restore Ecosystems. And that will be really something that we really look forward. So thank you all for this. And with that, have a nice, I would not say trip home because you're already home possibly. But anyway, thank you for this. Okay?
Thank you, Jose.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank
Bye.
you.
Okay.